Hi, everybody. Welcome to the GEICO 15-Minute Moto Show. I'm Ralph Sheheen. Today, we're going to talk with a media colleague of mine in the motorcycle industry. You've probably read his stuff in Racer X, and you've probably heard him calling the Lucas Oil Pro Motocross Championship, as well as American Flat Track. Jason Weigandt joining us here today, and we're in your garage.
Yeah, I know, and it's not the cleanest out there.
Well, it is now because we swept the floor for you.
I do appreciate what the people at Speed Sport do, well beyond media, even janitorial services.
Yes, that is correct.
Yes.
You can get a full month subscription and janitorial services. Pretty cool deal.
Better than good housekeeping. My wife is pumped on Speed Sport right
Next
now.
time we'll do the kitchen. We'll trade that all out.
Come anytime you want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell me how you got started with the passion for motorcycling first.
Yeah. So like almost anyone, when you're as deep as we are, you don't acquire it. You're pretty much born that way. So my dad worked for Bel Ray, which is an oil company.
Right.
And I remember visiting Dad at the office at 3 or 4 years old, and they would just have stacks of magazines because they advertised. So they got all the motocross magazines and motorcycle magazines for free, and they'd throw them out at the end of the month, and I was crawling all over these. So my dad would bring them home. So essentially, I had a subscription to every magazine that existed in the industry from the time I could essentially read. I mean, I was reading Cycle News at age 8, reading Supercross and road racing race reports. And ATVs were a big thing at that time, four-wheelers and three-wheelers, so my parents got me one of those, and I think I started riding at age 6. So that was pretty much my life, and then eventually racing started to come on TV at a more consistent pace in, say, the late 80s, watching you sometimes on ESPN.
Oh, go ahead and date me.
Yeah, exactly. How about that? 90s, let's just say that.
Yeah.
Early 90s, not late 80s. So it's been a lifelong thing, and as it probably works for you, I can't even draw a line between the time before I worked in the industry and when I did, because the knowledge or following it didn't ramp up. It was the same level. From obsessed fan to being paid to cover it was the exact same level of excitement that I have now.
So was there ever a period in there when you thought, I could be the next Ricky Carmichael?
No, as a rider, my parents were not really too pumped on this thing. Even though my dad worked at this company, he was in charge of inventory and solvents. It was never on the racing side.
Okay.
So I think that they were kind of soft-selling the racing thing. So unlike most racing parents, there was a lot of discouragement about how you shouldn't like this, and you probably would be terrible at it. So let's not even try. And as a kid, whatever mom and dad say, you kind of take for granted. I've looked back as an adult and I'm like, I think they were working me a little bit.
Yeah.
They don't really know if I would have been terrible or not. They just wanted to know that I wouldn't even want to try.
Yeah, but now you know what it takes to be a Ricky Carmichael, James Stewart, Cooper Webb. So could you have been?
Well, the problem is the parents already do know, right? They would have known the level of sacrifice that you're signing up for.
Yeah.
As a kid, it all sounds great.
Yeah, but
right?
are the skills there? I mean, like,
I would say,
could you carry a pro license?
I would say this. So I had these four-wheelers and three-wheelers when I was growing up. I wasn't officially able to have a motorcycle until I was in my 20s, till I had my own job and I was out of mom and dad's house. And then, as you know, when you're in this industry, the first thing you don't have time to do is have actual weekend hobbies, like most people would. So I would say for the amount of time I've ridden, I'm probably ahead of most of my peers. Like when I picked it up was when other guys at the magazine did. And they don't even do it anymore.
Right.
So I would like to think that I could have done something decent. Now, what I do is I go out and bash around in the woods at a GNCC, or a hare scramble, as we call it. I tried many times learning how to do doubles and triples, and that ended up with these wrists being broken and these ankles being broken and the whole 9.
Yeah.
Motocross, when you're trying to learn it at 23 and just go out there and practice and follow someone off the double, 50-50 proposition at best. So eventually, mom and dad are saying to me, we told you so. And I'm like, but if I had learned it at age 5,
I might have
been safer.
Yeah.
And they're like, but yeah, now you're adding 15 more years of injuries, maybe not.
Right.
So riding wasn't even in the cards for me at all. But yes, Ralph, I do think about it as a what if literally every day of my life. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
So they're not just big bikes for dad, there's little bikes for the kids.
Yeah.
So somebody's thinking about it down the road.
Well, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So as my parents were, we're going to try to tamp this down as much as possible. My son, and again, as you know, having kids, you can't make them like it. They either do or they don't.
Right.
So my son at age 1 is literally crawling to get to the copy of the Racer X magazine because there's a picture of something cool, which ends up being racing. He's into any form of competition, but especially racing. Even NASCAR, not just two-wheel stuff, four-wheel stuff as well. He loves MotoGP. So I'm just trying to give the opportunity not to become a professional racer, But we all know you learn great life skills, maturity, how to survive, think for yourself, character building. Racing has changed a lot, even in, say, not to date myself, I'll say 20 years since I was a kid. I'm just going to say 20, give or take. It is so much easier, the racing industry. I could literally go to a training facility 2 hours from here and send him a check, and he could ride 7 days a week with a coach, and they could tell him everything to do to make his way up the ranks. But I don't even know if that's necessarily where I want this to go. So my decision point is totally different than it would have been for my mom and dad. Like before it was, how could we even do this? To now it's so easy, it's hard to not do it. Yeah, I'm trying to keep the brakes on a little bit. Let's make it a hobby and let's have fun. Yeah. Yep.
So when did the media side of things come into play?
Yeah, I was fortunate at my age when I was graduating college, and I did not expect to ever work in this industry. There's literally 8 jobs like this. There's probably a dozen people at best that are making a living covering motocross races. So that wasn't on my radar. And when I was graduating, the economy was rolling. It was so easy to get a regular job. So my degree is in public relations, and I figured I'm from New Jersey, so I'll go to Philadelphia or I'll go to New York City and work at a PR firm. Maybe I'll ride on weekends and I'll be a fan. But it was worth to me just, what if I take a year before I get the real job to go to races and network? Maybe I'll meet some friends. Maybe someday I'll be able to claim that I knew some people and I'm buddies with those guys. I didn't expect it to turn into a job. And for me, Racer X is West Virginia. It was the only Eastern publication. Everything else in California.
Yeah.
I was never going to meet those guys. But I could drive 6 hours and go to the Eastern races. Davey Coombs was just starting this magazine called Racer X. It had been a newspaper. It was ramping up. So I'm like, if I meet this guy, and he was doing a lot of TV at the time too, I'm like, he seems to have a pretty good handle on how this all works. So if I can meet that guy, maybe I'd learn something. Maybe it turn into something. I did not expect it to necessarily be full-time work. There's not a lot of these jobs go around.
Right.
But I had just enough foot in the door to stick it out. So I just kept going. I kept pushing off the full-time job. And then eventually Davey's like, hey, we need people to do the jobs people don't want. Answering the phones, what class should I be in if I want to race this quad in this race? So it turned into that, probably like yourself, a lot of get the local newspapers and local people to know these races are going on. Not the awesome jobs that folks like you and I eventually got. But I took whatever they had to offer.
Sure.
Yeah, and got me in the door, and I am literally about to celebrate 20 years with this company.
So for those that maybe don't know what you do at Racer X,
Yeah.
what are your responsibilities there?
Yeah, so if you see anything on the website, that's under my jurisdiction, right? So I'm either writing it or editing it or assigning it. Every idea on that site is, we need to cover this, this, this. I have this interview lined up. So that's predominantly it. But as you know, websites suddenly have become the digital department, right? So now it's also the podcasts and also the videos and also social media. And by the way, we do still have the magazine, and since I can write, I'm still usually writing a story or two a month for that. So we keep adding, we're never subtracting.
Right.
So it's pretty all-encompassing. The actual title is editorial director, because it is kind of like anything you see, it's rolled through my desk at some point.
Yeah. Eventually, you added the electronic side to your career as well, doing some of the announcing. How did that all come about?
Yeah, so again, I was just taking the job that no one wanted to take. So it was literally our Grand National Cross Country Series, bikes and ATVs in the woods, and I'm the PR guy, so I'm getting the local newspapers to know about it. So I have to learn the racing and the racers in depth. They had a TV contract. No one knew anything about the ATV side at all. So I'm feeding the announcers copious notes, and eventually they just said, you know what would be easier than you sending us the notes? Do you want to just do it? And these races on race day are 12, 14 hours, and you can't even see the action. They're in the woods. So you're just killing time. So the announcer at the track, Rodney Tomlin, who's still the announcer to this day, hey, you want to talk for 5 minutes? You want to talk for a half hour? Hey, here's the mic. I'll be back in an hour. So these things are all happening at once, and the next thing you know, I'm an announcer. When I went to college, broadcasting was what I wanted to do, but I was always following the path of least resistance. What's the job that no one wants first? And then I'll take the job I want later. And that's how it turned out. So with that first announcing gig there and getting on television, it just led to more and more. And now it's probably 50-50 broadcasting and journalism. Yeah.
So do you enjoy one more than the other, moto or flat track?
I mean, moto is still what I grew up doing, absolutely. There is something refreshing about when you and I go to a flat track race, you know, they don't have as much media on them. So almost any story I get, any interview I get is new and fresh and exciting. Where you know, if I interview someone at a supercross race, by the time I get to my computer, 5 people have already interviewed them. So there's something neat about that. And I feel, as you probably agree, all racing is somewhat similar. Their stories are similar, the grit, the rise to the top. To me, it's equally compelling. So I actually find myself now wanting to convince people of that. Like this interview with Briar Bauman, our champion in flat track, his story is just as good as Cooper Webb. So give it a shot.
Yeah. Was there a moment, whether it was either on the written side or the broadcast side, an interview that was really tough?
Yeah, it happens. And like I've said, it's gotten easier now because I think the riders don't take themselves as seriously as possible, as they used to.
What was the moment?
Well, this was a tough one. We had a situation where James Stewart came back he didn't race motocross for a few years. He comes back. James wasn't always the most outgoing as far as what his intentions were. So he's just back at the races and he wins the first 4 motos going away, no problem. So it's all great. So we're assuming James is happy to be here. Everything's going excellent. We don't really know what his thought process is for sure. And then in the 5th moto of the year, he crashes randomly while out front. And then we find out it was a photographer had run across the track. And we had the GoPro footage from his helmet, and you could have put it in front of a jury of 13 people, and 7 would have said, that photographer was too far away, that didn't affect his focus, and 5 would have said, that photographer caused that crash. And in the heat of the moment on a live television show, what do we say? Is it the photographer at fault? The person that runs the track at fault? Is James at fault? Is it just random racing? And then James, who's now hurt, he hurt his wrist, he just goes in his motorhome and doesn't tell anyone anything, so we don't know his side of it. Those things become very hard to cover because what you know is, as you've experienced, 5 days later we're going to have the real story, but whatever we said in those first 5 minutes is recorded forever, and we could look really right or really wrong.
Right.
And you're just guessing because you don't have the information at that time. Yeah.
Was there a moment in any of your calls that is a super highlight moment that you look back, oh, I'm so glad I got to be a part of that one?
Yeah. The all-time one, we call it the Chatapult. Chad Reed, who you know well,
yes.
had this crash at Millville, Minnesota. They've actually named the jump after him. It was myself and your good buddy Jeff Emig making the call. And it was a fantastic season. He's battling Ryan Villapota and Ryan Dungey, and it's coming down to the wire. And Chad was never known as the all-out speed guy. He was more the consistent one. But the title was within his reach. And he passes Dungey and Villapota in the first minute of the moto like we usually don't see Chad do. And I'm seeing Chad go to a level we've never seen him go before. Seconds later, he is flying off the motorcycle in midair off a jump. And this jump has been here 30 years.
Yeah.
No one has ever crashed in this section, so we don't know what's coming next. And as a lot of your calls probably are, this whole thing unfolds in 18 seconds or so, but it felt like an hour. When he was in the air, I remember thinking,
rolling up the windows.
Rolling up the windows. He's 30 feet up.
Oh, it's remarkable.
And I'm thinking, we will never see Chad Reed race again. He is going from one of his best moments to the end of his career, and it is flashing before our eyes. He lands on the side of the jump. He doesn't get hurt. He gets back on the bike.
Yeah.
And then we knew that clip is going to live in infamy. And then you are just running through it reverse in your mind. That's going to be heard by millions of people. Please tell me it sounded good, because we will never get a chance to redo this, and we will never have a clip this popular.
Right.
And that one came out well, and it's pretty funny now where Chad's kids, most of them not even born at that time,
right,
they still, when they hear me, when I meet them at the BMX track, they're like, you're the voice of the, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
He just went 30 feet.
Yeah.
So his kids have heard this clip a million times.
Sure.
So those moments, you better get that call right. There are no do-overs.
No.
Yeah, and it's going to be played by kids for the next 20 years.
Black hole television never to be changed again.
Yep.
So what's the one thing you want to either write about or broadcast in the future? It doesn't have to be moto or flat track. It could be something else in the world.
Yeah. So I'm a closet car guy, not even a car racing guy. I do like car racing. All racing, like I said, has that same tint that I like either way. But I'm a car guy, and if you look at car media has changed so much. It was the same thing, just print. You know, I'm into the nuts and bolts of it. Now, on the motocross side, I wasn't a mechanic, I wasn't a crew chief, right? So I always will in those things defer. You'll never hear me talk about riding styles. I probably know a lot more than I talk about, but that is not my position to explain what someone did technically or on the motorcycle. But I'm a closet car guy, and that's what I'm into. When I'm spending my free time, it's usually watching people testing cars on YouTube.
So what would you want to do with it?
Yeah, so I'm the cheapest guy on earth. That's the goal. It's always the cheapest guy.
I've heard this about you.
Yes, exactly. This is something I wear proudly, right? So for me to scheme and steal and how you can have, for example, what's on my mind right now is how the brand Alfa Romeo, all enthusiasts love Alfa Romeo, but they are not mainstream in the same way, say, BMW is, right?
Right.
So you can get Alfa Romeos for a steal. You can get a BMW level car just because most people haven't heard of it. So it's kind of like the Moneyball thing in sports. You're trying to go where people aren't. What's the thing that's not popular yet and might be later that I can get in on the bottom of this? So that's where my mind is when it's not on motorcycles.
Okay,
Yeah.
but what's the one thing that you would want to? So would you want to write about cars or talk about cars?
Yes. So because of the
okay.
broadcasting skills, it probably makes more sense to do it as a spoken thing or a television show about it.
Cars.
However, I again know the formula. Fewer people want to write than want to talk.
So you would write about cars first.
Yeah, work your way in first.
Okay.
It's always the play.
So
Yeah.
as a motorcycle guy,
Yeah.
I believe it. There's bikes here.
Yeah.
You're going to have to work on the car side of things because as I'm staring out the other side of your garage,
Yeah.
there's 2 minivans out there. So it's going to be quite a while before you have any kind of street cred.
Well, you actually
on the
made
car
it even
side.
worse because what that is the minivan of pickups. That is the Honda Ridgeline. But you can't tell from the front of that if that's a
No,
Honda
I
Odyssey
couldn't.
or a pickup.
Yeah.
Yes. So I have the minivan of pickups. Yes. But a true enthusiast, Ralph, would tell you from an engineering standpoint, that is a much more practical vehicle for hauling than the average pickup. And that's why I picked it.
And knowing you,
Yeah.
you got it for cheap.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. We're going to have another episode of the GEICO 15-Minute Moto Show every Monday right here. And don't forget to get your latest copy of Racer X so you can read what these guys have going in the moto world. And of course, you can catch Jason on all the American Flat Track and Lucas Oil Pro motocross shows. We'll see you out at the races. You need to work on your street cred.
It costs a lot of money to do that.